The grand hall of the Galactic Council floated in the void between stars, a massive structure made of crystal and light. Inside, representatives from 100 different worlds celebrated what they thought was the end of the greatest war in their history. Commander Vex of the Krull Empire stood at the center, his 4 arms raised in victory. His species had fought the longest, lost the most ships, and now claimed the greatest share of the peace treaty. Around him, the blue-skinned traders counted their profits, while the tall, thin scientists recorded every word for their archives. 10,000 cycles of war, Vex announced to the gathering. 10,000 cycles of death and destruction. But today, we sign the Treaty of Stars. Today, the killing ends. The other species murmured their agreement. The war against the swarm had nearly destroyed them all. The mindless creatures had emerged from dark space 50 years ago, consuming entire planets like locusts. Every civilized race had united against them, and after decades of fighting, they had finally won. Admiral Cora of the Defense Fleet walked forward, her metallic skin reflecting the lights of the hall. The last swarm ship was destroyed 3 days ago in the Outer Rim. Our sensors show no remaining threats. The galaxy is safe. But even as she spoke these words, something strange appeared on the long-range scanners. A small fleet of unknown ships had entered the galaxy from an unexplored region. They moved with purpose, heading straight for the Council's location. "Sir," a young officer interrupted the celebration, "we have unknown contacts approaching. 5 ships, configuration unknown." Vex turned his many eyes toward the display screen. The ships were crewed by Galactic Standard's metal boxes with engines strapped to them. They looked almost primitive compared to the sleek vessels of the Council races. Pirates? Someone suggested. Scavengers come to pick through the battlefield? "No," said the science chief, studying the readings. "These ships are using a type of drive we've never seen. And look at their trajectory. They're coming from the dead zone." The dead zone was a region of space no one explored. The radiation there was too intense, the gravity wells too unpredictable. Nothing could survive there. Yet these ships had emerged from its heart. "Open communications," Vex ordered. "Let's see who dares interrupt our peace celebration." The main screen flickered to life. What appeared shocked everyone in the hall. The creatures on the screen were small, with only 2 arms and soft pink skin. They had no natural armor, no visible weapons growing from their bodies. They looked weak, fragile even. "Greetings," the creature said, and the universal translator struggled with the strange language. "I am Captain James of the Earthship Pioneer. We've been monitoring your war with the swarm. We've come to warn you. It's not over." Laughter filled the hall. These primitive beings thought they knew something the combined intelligence of 100 worlds didn't. "The war is over, little creature," Vex said dismissively. "We have destroyed the swarm. Every last ship, every last warrior. Our sensors confirm it." Captain James shook his head. "Your sensors can only detect what you know to look for. The swarm you fought? That was just their scouts. We've been tracking the main force for months. They're coming, and they'll be here in less than 72 hours. The laughter died. Admiral Cora stepped forward. "That's impossible. Our deep space arrays would have detected. Your arrays scan in 3 dimensions, James interrupted. The swarm learned to move through folded space after their scouts engaged you. They're approaching from a direction you can't even perceive yet. And how would you primitive creatures know this?" Vex demanded, his voice dripping with contempt. James smiled, and something in that expression made every warrior in the hall uncomfortable. "Because we've been fighting them for 200 years in the dead zone. We thought we were alone in the universe, fighting a war no one else knew about. Then we detected your battle. We came as fast as we could. You survived in the dead zone for 200 years?" The science chief's voice was barely a whisper. "Survived?" James laughed. "We thrived. And now we're here to help." But you need to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you. Everything you think you know about warfare is about to change. Asterisk. The council chamber erupted in chaos after Captain James finished his warning. Representatives from different species argued among themselves, some calling the humans liars, others demanding proof of their claims. Vex slammed his ceremonial staff against the floor, creating a thunderous echo that silenced the room. "You claim the main swarm force is coming," Vex said, his voice steady but skeptical. "Show us your evidence, human." Captain James nodded to someone off-screen. Suddenly, the main display filled with data star charts, energy readings, and something else. The mathematical equations were unlike anything the council scientists had seen, yet they were elegantly simple. "This is how the swarm moves through folded space," James explained. "They compress reality around their ships, traveling through dimensions your sensors can't detect. We learned this the hard way when they first attacked our colonies in the dead zone." The science chief studied the data, his large brain pulsing with activity. This is impossible. The energy requirements alone would need the power of a small star." "Exactly," James said. "Each swarm fleet travels with a captured star core. They drain it dry, then move to the next system. That's why they're so dangerous. They don't just destroy worlds. They consume entire solar systems." Admiral Cora floated forward, her metallic form humming with barely contained energy. "If this is true, our weapons are useless. Our shields can't stop something that exists partially outside our dimension." "Your weapons, yes," James agreed. "But humans learned something important about the swarm. They have one weakness. They can't maintain their dimensional fold when exposed to a specific frequency of radiation. A frequency that happens to be lethal to most species, but harmless to humans." The hall fell silent. The implications were staggering. "You're immune to radiation that kills the swarm?" Vex asked. "Not immune," James corrected. "Resistant. Our home planet, Earth, has a unique magnetosphere that exposed us to similar radiation for millions of years. We evolved with it. When we met the swarm, we discovered our bodies naturally produce a field that disrupts their technology." New image appeared on the screen: human soldiers in simple armor, carrying weapons that looked almost primitive. But around them, swarm warriors were falling, their advanced technology failing. "This is from our first major battle," James continued. "We lost 90% of our forces, but we learned. We adapted. We did what humans do best. We refused to die." The traitor representative spoke up. "If you've been fighting them for 200 years, why haven't you won?" James's expression darkened. "Because we've been holding the line, nothing more. Earth and our colonies have a combined population of 15 billion. The swarm numbers in the trillions. We've been fighting a delaying action, hoping to find allies. When we detected your war, we thought we'd found them. But you arrived after we won." Vex pointed out. "You won against their scouts," James emphasized. "A force of maybe 10,000 ships. We've been fighting their main fleet, over 1 million vessels. And they're all heading here now." The science chief's skin turned pale. 1 million ships? Our combined fleets number less than 50,000. "Which is why you need us," James said simply. "Our ships may look primitive, but they're designed specifically to fight the swarm. Our weapons use the radiation frequency that disrupts them. Our shields are tuned to block their dimensional attacks. And most importantly, our soldiers can board their ships and fight in environments that would kill any other species." Vex stood slowly, his 4 arms spreading in what his species considered deep thought. "You're saying that the supposed weakest species in the galaxy is our only hope?" "We're not weak," James said, and there was steel in his voice. "We're just different. Your species evolved on paradise worlds, developing technology in peace. Humans evolved on a death world, where everything tried to kill us. We didn't develop technology to make life easier. We developed it to survive. And now, that survival instinct might save us all. Admiral Cora accessed her tactical systems. "Show us your fleet's capabilities." The screen shifted to show the 5 human ships in detail. They were ugly things, all function and no form. But the sensors' readings were confusing. The ships seemed to be made of materials that shouldn't exist, alloys that were impossibly dense, yet somehow flexible. "Our ships are made from collapsed matter," James explained. "We mine it from the dead zone's black hole accretion disks. It's nearly indestructible and naturally resistant to dimensional phasing." The council members exchanged glances. These humans had turned the most dangerous region of space into a resource. They had survived where no one else could. Maybe, just maybe, they were exactly what the galaxy needed. Asterisk. The transformation of the council station began immediately after the vote. By a narrow margin, the assembled species had agreed to trust the humans. Now, with less than 70 hours until the swarm's arrival, the peaceful diplomatic station was becoming a fortress. Captain James stood in the command center alongside Admiral Cora and Commander Vex, watching human engineers work alongside alien technicians. The humans moved with an efficiency that surprised everyone. They seemed to instinctively know how to adapt their technology to alien systems. "Your people work fast," Cora observed, watching a human engineer named Tom splice human power cores into the station's shield generators. "We've had 200 years of practice," James replied. "Every human learns basic engineering and combat from childhood. On Earth, we call it mandatory survival education." Vex studied a human soldier installing weapon systems. The soldier, a young woman named Lisa, carried a rifle that looked almost primitive, just a metal tube with a trigger. But when she test-fired it at a target drone, the projectile tore through shields designed to stop plasma cannons. "Kinetic weapons?" Vex said with disbelief. "You use bullets against the swarm?" Lisa looked up from her work. "Not just bullets, sir. Each round is coated with a radiation compound that disrupts their dimensional phasing. One shot forces them fully into our dimension. The second shot kills them." "Simple but effective," the science chief mused, having joined the group. "Your entire approach to warfare is different from ours. We developed energy weapons for efficiency. You developed whatever killed the enemy fastest." James nodded. "When you're fighting for survival, elegance is a luxury. Results are all that matter." An alarm suddenly filled the command center. On the main screen, long-range sensors had detected something, a massive gravitational distortion at the edge of the system. "They're early," James said grimly. "They must have pushed their star cores harder than usual." The distortion grew larger, and then space itself seemed to tear open. Ships poured through, not the 10,000 the Council had fought before, but hundreds of thousands. They filled the screen like a plague of locusts, their biomechanical forms pulsing with alien life. "By the void," Vex whispered. "There are so many." James was already moving, barking orders to his crew. "All human vessels, execute Formation Delta. Upload targeting data to allied ships. Begin charging the radiation grid." "Radiation grid?" Cora asked. "Watch," James said simply. The 5 human ships spread out in a wide formation, each one beginning to glow with a sickly green light. Energy arced between them, creating a net of radiation that expanded outward. When the first wave of swarm ships hit the grid, their dimensional phasing failed instantly. They materialized fully in normal space, suddenly vulnerable. "All Council ships, target the materialized vessels," Cora commanded. "Fire at will." The space around the station erupted in violence. Plasma beams, particle cannons, and missile volleys filled the void. The swarm ships, forced into normal space by the human radiation grid, took massive damage. Hundreds died in the first minute, but there were so many more behind them. Grid power at 60%, Tom reported from his station. We can maintain this for maybe 20 minutes before we need to recharge. Then we make those 20 minutes count, James said. He turned to Vex. Commander, can your heavy cruisers form a firing line behind our grid? Vex's forearms moved rapidly over his command console. Already done. But what happens when your grid fails? Then we go to Plan B, James said. Which is? James smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. We get personal. On the screen, human ships were doing something unprecedented. As the swarm adapted to the radiation grid, finding ways to partially phase through it, human vessels were ramming into them. But instead of being destroyed, the human ships were punching through the swarm vessels like bullets through paper. Your ships are surviving ramming attacks? The science chief was astounded. Collapsed matter hulls, James reminded him. We can hit them harder than they can hit us. And when we punch through their ships, we leave behind boarding parties. The view shifted to show the interior of a swarm vessel. Human soldiers in sealed armor were fighting creatures that looked like nightmares. Part machine, part organic, all deadly. But the humans fought with a savagery that matched the swarms, using weapons and tactics that seemed almost primitive, but were devastatingly effective. Your soldiers are as brutal as the enemy, Vex observed. We learned long ago, James said quietly. Sometimes to defeat a monster, you have to become something worse. The difference is, we can choose when to stop being monsters. The swarm can't. The battle had raged for 6 hours. The human radiation grid had failed after 30 minutes, lasting longer than expected, but still not enough. Now the fight had become a brutal close-quarters massacre that played to humanity's unexpected strengths. Inside the Council Station's medical bay, representatives from various species watched in horrified fascination as human medics worked on wounded soldiers. A human marine named Mike had lost an arm to a swarm blade, but he was laughing as the medic sealed the wound. Just strap a gun to the stump, Doc, Mike joked. I can shoot left-handed. The healer prime, a delicate creature with 6 healing appendages, floated over. How can you laugh? You've lost a limb. Mike shrugged with his remaining shoulder. Lost worse things and kept fighting. On Earth, we have a saying, pain is just weakness leaving the body. Besides, the company promised me a cybernetic replacement if I survive. I'll be better than new. This was what unsettled the Council species most. Not humanity's weapons or tactics, but their attitude toward violence and death. They treated warfare like other species treated sports, with enthusiasm, dark humor, and an almost casual acceptance of casualties. In the command center, Captain James received a report that made him pause. They're adapting faster than expected. The swarm is learning our radiation frequencies. So we change frequencies, Tom suggested from his engineering station. Ket, the specific frequency that works is tied to human biology. Change it, and we lose our advantage. James turned to Vex and Cora. We need to accelerate Plan B. You mean boarding their command ship? Cora asked. That's suicide. No one has ever survived being on a swarm vessel for more than minutes. Council species haven't, James corrected. But humans have been doing it for decades. The trick is not to fight their warriors. It's to poison their ships. He brought up a schematic of a swarm vessel. The biomechanical structure was complex, part living tissue, part machine. The swarm ships are living organisms, James explained. They need to breathe, to eat, to process waste. We discovered that human blood is toxic to them. Our iron-based hemoglobin reacts with their copper-based equivalent like acid. Vex's 4 eyes widened. You're saying human blood is a weapon? Everything about humans is a weapon to the swarm, James said. Our sweat contains salt that corrodes their organic components. Our breath carries bacteria that infects their biological systems. We're walking biological weapons to them. The science chief was running calculations. If this is true, one human could contaminate an entire ship. Exactly. Which is why we're sending boarding teams to their largest vessels. Not to fight to bleed on everything. It sounded insane, but the Council had seen enough human insanity work to stop doubting. Vex authorized his own warriors to provide covering fire for the human boarding pods. On the main screen, small human craft were launching from their ships, heading straight for the massive swarm command vessels. The swarm's defensive fire was intense, but the humans flew through it with suicidal determination. Boarding pod Alpha has breached, someone reported. Beta and Gamma are following. The view switched to helmet cameras from the boarding teams. The interior of the swarm ship was a nightmare of organic corridors and mechanical horrors. Human soldiers moved through it, not trying to fight, but simply existing. Where they walked, the walls began to bubble and dissolve. Where their blood splattered from wounds, the floor melted. It's working, Cora breathed. The ships are dying from the inside, but the cost was obvious. The boarding teams were taking massive casualties. For every swarm ship they contaminated, dozens of humans died. Yet more kept going. Why? Vex asked James, "Why do your people throw their lives away so readily?" James watched the tactical display, his face grim. Because every human knows that their death might mean their children live. We don't fight for glory or conquest. We fight for tomorrow. A massive explosion lit up the screen. One of the swarm command ships had died, its biological systems completely corrupted by human contamination. Then another. And another. The swarm fleet, which had seemed unstoppable, began to falter. Without their command ships, the smaller vessels lost coordination. They started attacking each other in confusion, their hive mind breaking down. "They're retreating," Admiral Cora announced. "The swarm is actually retreating." The council chamber erupted in celebration, but Captain James remained focused on the tactical display. "They're not retreating. They're regrouping." This was just their first wave. The celebration stopped. First wave? James nodded grimly. Welcome to humanity's reality. The war never really ends. It just pauses while both sides reload. Asterisk. 3 days after the battle, the council chamber had been transformed. Where once there had been separate sections for each species, now humans worked alongside every race, sharing knowledge and learning from each other. The integration was remarkably smooth, driven by necessity and mutual respect. Captain James stood before the assembled council, his uniform still bearing scorch marks from the battle. Beside him, several human officers displayed captured swarm technology. "The swarm will return," James began without preamble. "Our analysis of their retreat pattern suggests they're heading to their staging area, about 6 months' travel at their maximum speed. That gives us 6 months to prepare for a war unlike anything this galaxy has seen." Commander Vex stepped forward. "The Council has voted. We accept humanity's proposal for full military integration. Your species will lead our combined forces." It was a stunning reversal. Just days ago, these same species had laughed at humanity's primitive appearance. Now they were placing their survival in human hands. "We don't want to lead," James said, surprising everyone. "We want to teach. Every species here has strengths we lack. The Crawl have superior tactical discipline. The traders have supply lines we could never match. The scientists understand technology beyond our current level. We need to combine our strengths." The science chief floated forward. "You would share your advantages? Your immunity to the radiation weapon?" "We can't make you immune," James admitted. "But we can synthesize the compounds in human blood that harm the swarm. We can teach you our tactics. We can show you how to turn fear into fury, how to make desperation into determination." Over the following weeks, the transformation was remarkable. Krull warriors learned human close combat techniques, their 4 arms making them even more effective than human soldiers. The scientists reverse-engineered human collapsed matter technology, improving it beyond what humans had achieved alone. The traders established supply lines to the dead zone, turning humanity's dangerous home into a fortress. But perhaps the most significant change was psychological. Humans introduced concepts that were foreign to the peaceful council species total war: scorched earth tactics, mutual assured destruction. They taught that sometimes the threat of absolute annihilation was the only path to peace. You have to make the enemy believe you're crazier than they are. Lisa explained to a group of young Krull warriors. Make them think you'll destroy everything, including yourself, rather than let them win. Humans call it going full psycho, and it saved our species more than once. In the dead zone, human colonies that had hidden for centuries emerged to join the alliance. The council species were amazed to discover thriving cities inside hollowed-out asteroids, space stations powered by miniature black holes, and shipyards that could produce vessels from raw stellar material. How did you build all this? Admiral Cora asked during a tour of Mars Station, humanity's primary military base. Desperation is the mother of innovation, the station commander replied. When you can't run, you dig in. When you can't hide, you fight. When you can't win, you make sure the enemy loses too. The council species began to understand that humanity's strength wasn't in their technology or their biology. It was in their mindset. Humans had evolved not just to survive, but to thrive in chaos. They found opportunity in disaster, strength in weakness, and hope in hopelessness. 5 months into the preparation, long-range sensors detected movement. The swarm was returning, and this time their numbers were beyond counting. Millions of ships, perhaps tens of millions, advancing in a wave that would consume everything in its path. How do we fight that? Vex asked during the Emergency War Council. James smiled, and this time it was genuine. We don't fight it. We poison it. He revealed humanity's final secret. For 200 years, humans hadn't just been fighting the swarm, they'd been studying them. They'd discovered that the swarm's hive mind had a fatal flaw. It could be infected with what humans called a mental virus, an idea so contradictory to their nature that it would cause their entire network to collapse. And what idea could destroy them? The science chief asked. Individual choice, James said simply. The concept that each unit could choose its own path. We're going to teach the swarm about freedom, and it's going to destroy them from within. As the swarm fleet approached, the combined forces of the galaxy prepared for battle. But this time, they were led by humanity, a species that had turned weakness into strength, desperation into determination, and madness into method. The war was far from over, but for the first time in galactic history, there was genuine hope. Because now they had humanity on their side, and humans had one rule above all others: never give up, never surrender. And if you're going down, take as many of the enemy with you as possible. The swarm had awakened something they never expected: a species too stubborn to die, too crazy to quit, and too angry to lose. The real war was about to begin. Asterisk.